Hello, I'm Corinna Harrod and this is the Monday Night Review. Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the Monday Night Review. I hope you are all well. Thank you to everyone for your lovely feedback. On my first PG episode with my son Ned, he's really thrilled to have had some sweet messages from you and he loved doing it. So he has got a list of things he wants to get through. I've just banned him from doing Harry Curry. I have got limits, so we're not doing that. Yes, so he's really thrilled. I really appreciate it. He was just made a 10-year-old boy very happy. And thank you to everyone who has ordered t-shirts and hoodies. I hope you're loving them. Hi to all the pod dogs, obviously. And yeah, episode 99. We are doing gentle, spooky history today because the next couple of episodes is a lot, is all I'm going to say. So I thought I would lull you all into a full sense of security with some more creepy castles. Also, weirdly, after I started doing my research for the creepy castles, I realised that a lot of them are in the northern part of England, which is lovely. So we seem to be a lot in the north of England, and there's a lot of white ladies today. So let's get into it. Creepy castles. We're going to Pendragon Castle. Now, in my head, I'd heard of Pendragon Castle, always assumed it was Cornish. It's not Cornish. It's in northern Britain. It sits in the Vale of Malastang near Uthgill and Kirby Stephen in Cumbria along the banks of the River Eden. The structure as it is now dates back to 1173 when it was built by Hugh de Morville, who is one of the 4 knights responsible for the murder of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, in 1170. The castle was attacked by Scots raiding parties in 1342 and again in 1541, and after the latter attack it remained an uninhabitable ruin until it passed into the hands of Lady Anne Clifford. She rebuilt the castle in 1660. It was allegedly one of her favourite of the castles that she owned, which is lovely for her. And she added a brew house, bake house, stables and coach house, which is exactly, if I had a castle, what I would be wanting to add. So me and Lady Anne Clifford, very similar in that respect. But after her death, it passed to the Earl of Thanet, and he had no use for the castle, so he removed everything of value from it, including lead from the roof. And by the 1770s, much of the building above the second story had collapsed, and it's basically been left to go to ruin ever since. Now, one of the most famous legends, take note of the word legend, attached to the castle states that at one time it belonged to Uther Pendragon, father of King Arthur. Pendragon had a daughter named Sabrina who fell in love with the young man from a rival clan, and Uther forbade the relationship, and the young man was banished from the lands, and Sabrina, with her heart broken, took her own life by jumping from the top of the castle tower. Many believe that Sabrina's spirit still lingers in the castle, and her ghostly apparition has been seen wandering the halls and above the tower where she has supposedly met her tragic end. But that's not all. There are other spooky tales surrounding the castle, such as the sighting of a mysterious black dog that is said to be the harbinger of doom. A mysterious horseman has been seen silently galloping towards the castle, and some believe it's Uther Pendragon returning to seek shelter after a battle, or a frantic messenger trying to warn the family of a pending attack by the Scots. I think I'd find that creepier almost than seeing the White Lady. I mean, I'm assuming Sabrina's spirit is a White Lady. They seem to be in all these castle stories. But the thought of a horseman galloping towards you silently is rather spooky. It's also said that the castle is cursed, and those who dare to spend the night inside will be visited by Sabrina's ghostly presence. Despite the eerie legends, Pendragon Castle remains a popular attraction for tourists and ghost hunters alike. There have been numerous reports of paranormal activity, including strange noises, disembodied voices, and reports of people feeling like they're being watched. Now, normally when I hear this, especially about the people feeling uneasy and feeling like they're being watched, I just put it down to like electromagnetic stuff going on in the building. But pretty much all the castles we're talking about today, all the British castles we're talking about today, are really ruined. They're not sort of, that in some instances they are a tower perhaps left of the building. So there's not any electricity going on here. It's literally just some stones. So don't know what's going on there, but if you're going to Cumbria, you might want to visit Pendragon Castle. Then we are going to further north, up near the Scottish border, to Edlingham Castle, which is on the edge of Northumberland Park. It's got a fascinating past dating back to the 12th century, when it was built by Sir William Felton, whose ancestors made improvements to an existing manor house. His son was also called William, and he strengthened the defences as the Anglo-Scottish Wars continued. Basically, at the time, if you had a manor house, you could ask the crown if you could crenellate, and that's what happened here. It was a manor house that then got crenellated with permission from the crown so that it was easier to defend. Over the centuries, the castle has been home to many noble families and has seen its fair share of battle and sieges. Now, it was abandoned in the mid-17th century and quarried for stone, and this left only the impressive solar tower intact and some of the original foundations visible. In the 1980s, the rest of the ruins were excavated, and visitors can now walk through and climb over extensive buildings, outhouses, and defensive walls. So again, you have the amazing tower still standing, but that's about it. There's just lots of stones. So there have been numerous reports of ghostly apparitions, including that of a lady in white who's seen wandering the castle's halls. I think halls is putting it. Imagine where the halls would stand. The lady in white is believed to be a former resident of the castle, Lady Eleanora de Bracewell, and she was married to Lord of the castle, who at one time, Sir Hugo Swinburne, but she fell in love with another man, and when her husband found out, in a fit of rage, he killed her and buried her body in the castle walls. But that's not the only ghostly presence that has been reported at Edlingham Castle. There's also been sightings of a man dressed in armour, believed to be one of the castle's former knights. He's been seen walking the ramparts as if guarding the castle from any potential attackers. I would say that I don't know. I guess they're using knights here in the term of someone who was job it was. I don't think you walked the ramparts of your own castle. You had people to do that for you. But despite its spooky reputation, it's really popular, and history enthusiasts love it. As I said, it's got the solar tower is really impressive, and you can take guided tours of the castle, and it was because of its position near the Scottish border. It has seen a lot of battles fought there. But if you linger at the castle after dusk, be prepared for a possible encounter with one of the ghosts that are said to be there. Many have reported feeling a chill in the air or hearing strange noises when visiting Edlingham Castle by night. I mean, if you are outside in Northumberland at night, most of the time you are going to feel a chill in the air. So the next one, I would argue, visually is the most impressive. Pyjama Castle. We're going from the Scottish borders to Eastern Europe. Pyjama Castle is a striking fortress built into the side of a 123-metre high cliff in Slovenia more than 800 years ago. Thought to be the largest cave castle in the world, behind it are a series of secret tunnels cut into the cliffs. Its unique location and impressive architecture make it a popular tourist attraction, but what really sets it apart are the legends and stories associated with it. One of the most famous tales about Pyjama Castle is that of one of the castle's former owner, Erasm Luger. Luger was a 15th century robber baron who rebelled against the Habsburg Empire and took refuge in his castle. He was known for his cunning and bravery and was able to hold off the Habsburg forces for over a year while living in the castle's secret passageways and hidden chambers. Legend has it that Luger was eventually betrayed by one of his own men who signalled the Habsburg forces to attack the castle. Now, as with everything, people have to ruin it. Luger was allegedly killed by a shot from a cannon while on the loo. Though this bit of the story has no sources to back it up, but it pops up everywhere you read about this poor guy, even though they all then say, there's actually nothing to back this up. Despite his eventual downfall, Luger's story lives on in Pyjama Castle, where visitors can still see the secret passages and hidden chambers that he used to evade his enemies. But that's not the only legend associated with the castle. Another popular tale is that of a Black Knight, a mysterious figure who is said to haunt the castle's hall. The Black Knight is believed to be a ghost of another former owner of the castle who was murdered in his sleep by a rival family. Visitors have reported seeing the Black Knight's ghostly presence, dressed in full armour, wandering the castle's corridors. Some have even claimed to feel a chill in the air or a sudden drop in temperature when near the Black Knight's supposed resting place. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, Pyjama Castle is a fascinating piece of history that continues to capture the imagination of those who visit it. And you can take guided tours of the castle, and you can go through some of the passageways in the tunnel, and you can go into the dungeon. And then there's another separate touring company that takes you through all the passageways in the cliff behind, which sounds spooky to me. So, if you find yourself in Slovenia, make sure you go to see this castle. It is really amazing to look at. I think it just needs a drinks terrace. If it were mine, I'd be adding a little drinks terrace. You can sit in the sun, look out over your view, have a lovely time. Also, now, I may be wrong, I don't think it has a garden, so if that's something you're looking for in a potential property, obviously, I just don't know where my dogs would pee, but maybe there's an inner courtyard garden that I just haven't seen. It's this sort of thing that I'm always thinking of. So next up is Casa Loma. Now, our next castle is not really a castle. Casa Loma is a majestic mansion in the style of a castle in Toronto, Canada, and it was built in the early 1900s by a wealthy businessman named Sir Henry Pellat. Casa Loma was to be his dream home, a place where he could entertain guests and showcase his wealth and status. And the architecture is a blend of different styles, including Gothic, Romanesque and Baroque, giving the place a unique and memorable appearance. For many years, Casa Loma was the largest residence in Canada, with an oven big enough to cook an ox in, a lift, a central vacuum, I still want one of those, 2 secret passageways, and bowling lanes in the basement. It really was the house that had everything. During the Depression that followed World War I, the taxes on the mansion increased so much that Pellat was forced to sell furniture and art and eventually moved out in 1923, less than 10 years after he'd moved in. Casa Loma was then converted into a hotel and rapidly became a popular spot for wealthy Americans getting away from prohibition, doing a roaring trade until 1924, when the place was seized by the city for unpaid taxes, which just seems a bit unfair, if you ask me. After the seizure, Casa Loma stood empty for a while until it was leased by the Kiwanis Club in 1937. The Kiwanis Club is a global club that provides activities and a safe place for children in cities around the world, and Casa Loma seemed like a fun choice for location, but maybe a bit scary as well. Even by the 1930s, just a few decades after construction, this self-styled castle was renowned for paranormal activity and had been formally investigated by ghost hunters a number of times. One of the most famous legends is that of a white lady, another white lady, who is said to be the ghost of a former maid who worked at the castle. She allegedly fell in love with one of the gardeners and had a secret affair. However, when the affair was discovered, the maid was fired and the gardener was banished from the house. Distraught, the maid threw herself from the top of a tower. No, really, Another tower top plunge. These poor women. And it's said that her ghost still haunts the castle to this day. While the legend seems highly derivative of legends of old, it's entirely plausible that servants did die at Castelloma. Especially, in particular, hardly any large household. In particular, hardly any large household escaped the Spanish flu that swept through Toronto after World War I, claiming more than 60,000 lives in that city alone. Visitors to Castelloma have reported seeing the lady in white, dressed in a long, flowing gown and wandering the corridors. Hardly original, but what do you expect in an ersatz castle? You need to have your own white lady. Also, I personally don't wear white because I have too many dogs and children and ducks. So ducks, don't underestimate the amount of dirt caused by ducks. Whereas perhaps in the days where you had servants to do things for you, I know this white lady is supposedly a maid, you could wear white, you had other people to do that sort of thing for you. There have also been reports of other strange occurrences, such as unexplained noises and sudden temperature drops. A man is seen tending to the indoor garden in the conservatory, which I think is quite nice. If you're going to be a ghost, pottering about inside doing some houseplants, if that's your jam, sounds lovely. And children's voices are heard when no children are around, which does sound creepy. Though I would say my 6-year-old is the loudest person I've ever met, and his voice carries. So it could just be that people in Canada can hear him speaking from here, or they have a child equivalent that's just not in the building, but close enough that their voice carries. A young boy saw a man standing in a window on the second floor, and he notified a member of staff because the second floor was not accessible at the time, and it was thought of to be dangerous up there. So a member of staff was sent up to check, and no man was found. And whilst the child was waiting to see for the member of staff to return, he pointed to a portrait of Sir Henry Pallet and said that was the man he'd seen upstairs, and said, why is he looking so angry? Which I really hope someone says if anyone ever paints a portrait of me. I'm hoping that people want to know what made me so angry. Some members of staff have tried to film in various rooms, leaving cameras set up and switched on, and then locking the rooms behind them, only to return and find they've been switched off. In one very weird story, in the early days of the camcorder, one member of staff set up a camcorder, left the room, went back, and the tape had gone. Now, for anyone born probably in the 90s onwards, before phones, before little cameras, you had basically like a VHS tape that you would put into the side of a camera that would record onto. Now, what makes this story interesting is this lady knows that there was a tape in the camera because you could only press down the record button when there was a tape in the camera. So she knew, she pressed record, the record button stayed down, she left, she locked the door, they go back, it's not recording, there's no tape. The tape's never been found. This seems incredibly far-fetched, I know, but I do quite like the detail because it just reminds me of, do you remember you used to be able to not press record on some cassette players unless you pressed play and record at the same time? So this feels very familiar to me. So, and lots of members of staff do feel like there's something going on. That's why they were filming there, because they were like, right, weird stuff's happening. Let's film in here, shut the door, leave it. There's a tunnel that runs from the house to the stables, and a few visitors have reported feeling like they've been grabbed or had their hair pulled. And this again happens quite a lot. So I don't know whether it's the same people who read stuff online and then go and say, but this has been from the 30s. People have said that that's what's happened. They felt like someone's grabbing their legs. Also, another life dream, just have an underground tunnel that takes you to some stables. That's high on my list now. Maybe Lady Anne Clifford didn't have that in her castle, did she? People have also reported hearing a spirit in the tunnel sighing gruffly, and he's even been captured in recordings speaking and interacting with visitors. In one recording, he's heard mimicking a medium. There's been loads of mediums visiting there, and I really love this version of a grumpy ghost mimicking a medium, because she says, "Oh, he's a horrible person," whilst trying to make contact with him, and then he apparently mimics her afterwards. Members of staff now call him Mr. Happy. So this is one of the ones that I could go down a rabbit hole on YouTube, because there have been loads of paranormal investigators. I just want to hear Mr. Happy being grumpy. So then we're going back. We've had a bit of a trip overseas. We're now back in North Yorkshire to Spofforth Castle, which is another ruin. And at one time it was the main seat of the Percy family and was rumoured to be the place where the Magna Carta was drawn up in the 12th century. Pretty impressive. Though again, it was a manor house that was built there in the 11th century. Most of what structurally remains today is from the 15th century, and Spofforth played an important role in the country's history and was involved in several conflicts and battles. During the War of the Roses, the Percys supported the House of Lancaster, and in 1461 the castle was burned to the ground by the Yorkist supporters and lay in ruins for over 100 years. It was restored by Henry, Lord Percy, in 1559, but by this time the family's seat had moved to Alnwick in Northumberland, so it was restored, but then a steward lived there. Oh, some really fancy cars have just driven past. But then a steward lived there. It's quite nice if, but have a castle rebuilt, then it's your job to keep an eye on the castle while everyone's away. The last recorded occupant of the castle was the steward Sampson, who died there in 1604, and it was then reduced to ruin during the Civil War and was gifted to the state in 1923. One of the most famous tales is that of a Grey Lady. Legend has it that the Grey Lady is the ghost of a former resident of the castle. She was a wife of one of the castle's owner and is said to be very kind and charitable. However, tragedy struck when her husband was killed in battle, leaving her grief-stricken and alone. It's said that the Grey Lady died of a broken heart, but her spirit remains at Spofforth Castle to this day, and visitors in the castle have reported seeing the Grey Lady's ghostly presence dressed in a long grey gown, wandering the castle's ruins. Some have even claimed to hear her weeping or feel a sudden drop in temperature when near her supposed resting place. Again, North Yorkshire, sudden drop of temperature. I'm not going to put much weight on that. Paranormal investigators have caught EVPs that are hard to understand, and they think perhaps they're in French. But at one point they hear a woman's voice saying goodbye very clearly. As the story has it, that she's very kind and charitable and polite, so that would make sense. I do really like the fact that they think that a lot of the EVPs they caught are in French. I find it mesmerising when I'm down a YouTube hole watching paranormal investigators and they will be in Russia investigating something and the medium will be saying, oh, they say blah, blah, blah. You're like, no, I think they're probably going to be speaking Russian, not English. That's always my little bugbear. Why do mediums hear everything? Maybe a medium is listening and can answer me and it's me being a dick. But why do mediums hear everything in English? Or is that somehow how it works? Visitors can explore the castle ruins and imagine what life was like in medieval England. So it's worth a visit if you find yourself in North Yorkshire. And then we are off to somewhere close to my heart. We're going to Castle Rising, which is in Norfolk. It was built in the 12th century by William d'Aubigny. a powerful Norman lord who still has it still has one of the best examples of a stone keep anywhere in the country. The castle has played an important role in English history as once residence of Queen Isabella, the wife of King Edward II. But what makes Castle Rising really unique are the legends and stories associated with it. One of the most intriguing tales is that of the ghost of Queen Isabella, also known as the She-Wolf of France. The youngest living child of King Philip IV of France, Isabella was revered for her beauty, intelligence and charisma and arrived in England to marry Edward II. She was just 12. So although it says she was revered for her beauty, intelligence and charisma, wherever I've read this, it's implied that when she was still living in France, she was revered for her beauty, intelligence and charisma. She moved to England when she was 12. It feels a bit icky, doesn't it? Edward preferred the company of his friend Piers Gaveston, and by 1325, Isabella had gone to France with her lover, Roger Mortimer. The pair would eventually return to England with an army and force Edward to abdicate in favour of his son with Isabella, Edward III. The king agreed to abdicate. He was advised that basically if he didn't abdicate, he ran the risk of losing the throne and his son. They could choose someone else, essentially. So he abdicated in favour of his son, but this would mean that his son, who was too young to rule at the time, it would mean that his mother ruled as regent. So Isabella, this is why she is the She-Wolf of France, Isabella and Roger Mortimer basically took over the running of the country. But when Edward III was of age, he had Mortimer tried and executed, and his mother was at first held under house arrest, but then she was sent to Castle Rising, where she lived as the queen of the mother of a king would live. It was basically, even though it was her ruling as regent, because she wasn't, because Mortimer, she was the mother of the king. It was then when the trial arrived, deemed that she was, just a woman. She was doing what she was told. She was manipulated. So although she was originally under house arrest, she was then sent to Castle Rising, where she lived as the Queen Mother would. And she died in 1358 at Hertford Castle. But legend has it that after her death, Queen Isabella's ghost returned to Castle Rising, where she had been happy. And she is said to appear as a spectral figure, dressed in white, wandering the halls of the castle, and some believes that she is seeking revenge for her lover's mistreatment and ultimate death. And it's said that she's often seen near a window in the castle's keep, where she would have been looked out over the surrounding countryside during her lifetime. Again, you can go and visit Castle Rising. The keep is very impressive. All of these places, obviously you can take girls too, but they're the sort of place that I would take my sons for a good runabout. Anyone with boys knows if you need to take them places for a good runabout, a ruined castle is great because there's less stuff for them to break. And that is Creepy Castles Part 2. Thank you very much for joining. Buckle up. I'm saying that to myself. You guys can turn up and listen to a horrible story for our 100th episode. I need to buckle up because I've got to get all my notes and all my thoughts into one place, because I have a feeling it's going to be a 3-parter. So let's do this, basically. If you want to come and join the Patreon, you get extra episodes, you get extra stories every week, you get discounts on merch, you get to be part of my favourite people in the whole wide world, which, I mean, is that not worth something? You can find me on TikTok, Facebook, and what's the other one? Instagram at the Monday Night Revue. If you feel like saying rude things to me, TikTok is the place you can go. That's where the rude people are. And until next time, be kind, stay safe, and always check the back seat before you drive.